I was camping near a river in northern Oregon, deep in the forest where the trees grow tall and close, and the air smells like wet bark and pine needles. It was early fall, the kind of season where the cold creeps in quietly and settles into your bones before you even realize you're shivering. The whole day had been damp, not pouring rain, but that steady kind of mist that hangs in the air and soaks through your jacket after a few hours. My boots were muddy, my fingers stiff. I'd picked this spot because I'd seen pictures of the river, broad, clear, with mossy stones and smooth banks. But by the time I got there, fog had started to creep along the ground, and the beauty of the place disappeared into a gray smear. I set up camp in a small flat area a little uphill from the river. There was a ring of stones where someone had once built a fire, and some logs around it that made good sitting spots. I pitched my tent close by, tucked in between two thick cedar trees that blocked a bit of the wind. I didn't bother with a fire that night. Everything was too wet. The few sticks I found snapped like damp breadsticks and hissed smoke when I tried lighting them. I ate a cold dinner, jerky, a granola bar, a handful of trail mix, and sat there in the fog for a while before crawling into my sleeping bag. The silence was thick. It wasn't peaceful. It felt like the woods were holding their breath. I couldn't hear the river unless I really focused. No bugs, no birds, just a faint breeze and the occasional drip of water off the trees. When I turned off my headlamp, the darkness inside the fog was total. You couldn't even see the outline of your hand in front of your face. I laid there, trying to let my mind settle, but everything felt a little too still. I must have checked the zippers on my tent 3 or 4 times, just listening, making sure nothing was out there. Around 11 p.m., I heard the first scream. It came from somewhere off to the right of my tent, far enough that it sounded muffled, but close enough that I could tell it was a human voice. Not a word, not a cry for help, just a raw, horrible scream, like someone had been startled or hurt, high-pitched, sharp, and ending abruptly. My heart jumped into my throat. I froze. I didn't move a muscle. I just listened. Then, maybe 10 seconds later, another scream. Not from the same direction. This one came from farther uphill to the left. Different tone, different voice. Still no words. Just that same terrible, gut-level scream. Like something awful was happening, but no one was saying what. It went quiet again. I sat up slowly, careful not to make noise. My ears strained so hard it made my temples ache. The fog outside my tent was so thick I could hear the moisture dripping from the fabric. Then another scream, this one closer. Not next to me, but close enough that I could tell which way it had come from. Downhill toward the river. And then, for the next 15 minutes, they kept happening. One scream, then another, always separated by a few seconds, sometimes a minute, all from different spots, all without any words, sometimes louder, sometimes more faint, but always in that same awful tone. It was like they were calling to each other, not in conversation, just screaming, like they were echoing each other's pain or fear or anger. Couldn't tell which. My imagination started to run wild. Were they looking for each other? Was someone chasing someone else? Were they hurt? Lost? Playing some twisted game? I didn't want to look outside. I didn't want to see anything. I didn't even want to move. Every time I heard a scream, I held my breath and waited, as if not making noise would keep them from coming closer. I didn't have a gun with me, just a small camping knife. Not that it would have helped against anything serious. I pulled my backpack close and quietly unzipped the main pouch just to feel the handle of the knife. My hands were sweating. At some point, the screaming just stopped. Not slowly, just all at once. No fading, no final scream, just silence, like a switch had been flipped. I waited, maybe another hour. I laid there, eyes wide open in the dark, body stiff, listening for footsteps, breathing, twigs snapping. But nothing came, just that same thick, damp silence pressing in from all sides. Couldn't sleep. Every little sound made me flinch. A droplet on the tent wall, a gust of wind through the trees. At one point, I swear I heard something like fabric rustling outside, but it could have just been the breeze moving my rainfly. I stayed like that until the sky started to lighten. When dawn finally came, the fog was still heavy, but at least there was some pale light coming through it. I waited another 20 minutes or so, just to be sure, then unzipped my tent and stepped outside. My boots were wet, cold. The air smelled like wet moss and something faintly metallic, like old rust. I scanned the area around my tent. Nothing looked disturbed. My gear was untouched. No prints. No sign of anyone else having passed through. I walked carefully down toward the river, my boots squishing in the moss. The fog hung low over the water like a blanket. I followed the river upstream and then down, for maybe half a mile in each direction. I looked for signs. Ashes from a fire, footprints, drag marks, trash, anything. But there was nothing. The ground was soft from all the moisture, and if someone had been walking or running through here, I should have seen something. A broken branch, scuffed soil. But it was like I was the only person who had been out here in weeks. Eventually, I hiked back to camp, packed up my things quickly, and left. The whole walk back to the trailhead, I kept turning around, checking behind trees, scanning the distance. The fog stuck around most of the morning, never really clearing. I didn't see anyone on the trail. No campers, no hikers, nothing. When I got back to my car, it was right where I left it. No other vehicles around. On the drive out, I kept thinking about the sounds I'd heard. The way they weren't random. The pattern. How they answered each other. I thought maybe it was some sort of prank, but who would come all the way out here, deep into wet forest, in the middle of a foggy night just to scream like lunatics for 15 minutes? There were no roads nearby, no houses, no campsites within miles. I thought about maybe calling the ranger station, but what would I even say? I heard screaming, didn't see anything, and left? I didn't report it. I still think about that night sometimes, especially when I camp alone. I've done a lot of solo trips since then, but that one has stuck with me more than any other. It wasn't what I saw because I didn't see anything. It was what I heard. The sound of people screaming into the dark with no reason, no explanation, just those awful, raw voices cutting through the fog. And the fact that no one was ever there. A few years ago, I went camping with a group of college friends in the Sierra Nevada mountains. There were 6 of us total, all guys, all used to hiking and being outdoors. It was late summer, hot during the day but cool at night, and we'd picked a remote spot near a small creek about 5 miles from the nearest road. We'd all hiked in together with our packs and set up camp in a clearing surrounded by pine trees and granite boulders. The kind of place where you felt like the rest of the world was 100 miles away. That first day was great. We got in around noon, set up our tents, collected water, and spent the afternoon hanging out near the creek and making dumb jokes like we always did. Around 6 p.m., with the sun getting low, we decided to split up to gather firewood before it got too dark. We'd done this kind of trip before, so no one thought twice about splitting off. We each took different directions, told each other to stay within earshot, and brought headlamps just in case. I took my small pack and wandered further uphill toward the ridge where the trees were denser. I figured there'd be more dry, deadfall wood up there. I walked maybe 15 minutes from camp, keeping track of my steps and looking back now and then to remember landmarks. The slope wasn't too steep, but it was rocky, and I had to climb over a few fallen logs. I eventually found a spot where the ground was littered with dry branches and thicker limbs. I started stacking what I could carry into my arms, careful to avoid stuff that looked too rotten. I was probably out there for 30 minutes, maybe more. As I turned to head back, I noticed a small flicker of red light through the trees, maybe 50 yards downhill. It was quick, just a second or two. I paused and squinted in that direction, thinking maybe it was one of the guys using a red headlamp. Some of us used red lights at night to preserve night vision, so it wasn't that weird. I called out a quick, "Hey," but no one answered. I stood there for another few seconds, then shrugged and kept walking, a little faster now since the light made me uneasy for some reason. But before I could get far, I saw the red light again, closer this time, maybe 30 yards away, still off trail. It blinked once, then vanished. No sound, no movement, just the wind through the trees. I called out again, louder this time. Nothing. The forest was dead quiet. I don't know why, but it made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I didn't wait around. I adjusted the pile of wood in my arms and made my way back toward camp, faster than before, but trying not to trip on rocks or tree roots. By the time I got back, the sun was almost down and the fire was already going. Everyone else had returned with their bundles. I dropped mine near the pit and sat down, trying to push the weird moment out of my head. After we had dinner and things calmed down, I asked casually if anyone had used a red flashlight earlier, maybe to find their way or just messing around. They all said no, not even a maybe. A few of them didn't even bring flashlights, just headlamps with standard white LEDs. I didn't say anything more after that. I didn't want to make a big deal or seem paranoid. We sat around the fire until about 11. Then one by one we went to our tents. I was sharing mine with a guy named Rob. We zipped up the flap, got into our bags, and crashed hard after the long hike and food. But around 2 a.m., I woke up needing to pee. I tried to ignore it, but eventually I gave in, unzipped the tent as quietly as I could, and stepped out into the cold air. It was completely silent. The fire had burned down to a few glowing coals, and I could see the other tents like dark mounds against the trees. I walked a few feet away from the tent, into the brush, and as I was finishing up, I glanced toward the woods. There it was again, the red light. This time it was much closer, maybe 20 yards away, behind a tree near where the ridge started. It didn't flicker or move, just a steady red glow, like a small LED, peeking out from behind the trunk. It wasn't bright enough to light up anything around it, just enough to let me know it was there. Watching, I stood there frozen for a second. I didn't breathe. I didn't move. I just stared, hoping maybe my eyes were playing tricks on me. But no, the light was real, and it wasn't blinking. After a few seconds, it went out. Not slowly, just off. Gone. Nothing but black trees and the faint glow of coals behind me. I backed away slowly and got into the tent without saying a word. I didn't wake Rob. I lay there for hours, staring at the nylon ceiling, listening. There were no footsteps, no animal sounds, not even the wind. In the morning, I told everyone I'd seen something weird and that I wanted to go check it out. We all went together, 6 guys walking in a loose group, following the general direction where I'd seen the light. I didn't expect to find anything, honestly, but I still felt tense as we searched. We found nothing. No footprints, no disturbed brush, no trash, no signs of someone hiding or camping nearby. The ground was dry, covered in pine needles, but not enough to completely erase tracks. We saw nothing. Still, I know what I saw. I know it wasn't some kind of reflection or hallucination. It was a steady red light, too precise to be anything natural. And it moved. It changed position between when I was collecting firewood and when I saw it that night. Someone had been out there. We packed up later that day and hiked back down to the car. No one made jokes during the hike out. Everyone was quiet. I think they believed me even if they didn't say it. I still think about it sometimes. That red light, how close it got to our camp. The way it disappeared without a sound. I've done dozens of camping trips since then, but I never wander off alone anymore. And I always check my surroundings more than I used to, because whatever was out there, it wasn't one of us. And it wasn't supposed to be there. I had been planning the trip for weeks. Work had gotten too loud, the city too crowded, and I needed a break from people. I found this small lake deep in a section of forest in Washington state. No campgrounds, no marked sites, just backcountry access with a few old fishing trails leading in. It was the kind of place where if something went wrong, no one would hear you yell. And that was exactly what I wanted. I parked my car at a pull-off along the Forest Service Road and hiked in about 3 miles. The trail was barely visible in places, just patches of flattened grass and old footprints here and there. The air was damp and cool, the way it always is under thick tree cover. My pack was heavy but manageable: tent, food, water filter, bear spray, the usual. I had checked the weather before leaving and it was supposed to be calm for the next few days. No rain, no wind, just quiet. When I finally got to the lake, I could see the water glinting through the trees before I reached the shore. It was small, probably only 100 yards across, surrounded by dense pines and sloping hills. The far side was all forest, no trails, no visible signs of people. My side had a natural clearing just a few yards from the edge of the lake, a perfect flat spot for my tent. The ground was soft with pine needles and moss, and there were no signs of recent campers. I took my time setting everything up, pitched the tent, stashed my food in a dry bag and hung it high from a tree branch a bit away from camp, filtered some water from the lake, then just sat for a while on a flat rock near the shore. The first day was uneventful in the best way. Birds came and went. Few bugs, nothing bad. The breeze moved the tops of the trees, but down at ground level, everything felt still. I read for a while, took some photos of the lake, ate some trail mix. Around dusk, I cooked a small dinner on my stove, just freeze-dried pasta. I sat on a log, watching the last light disappear behind the trees across the lake. The water had gone perfectly still, like glass. By the time it was fully dark, the temperature had dropped enough to make me zip up my fleece and crawl into my sleeping bag. I left the rainfly rolled up so I could see the stars through the mesh roof of the tent. The sky was completely clear, no clouds, and no light pollution, just black and stars. I must have dozed off not long after. I remember adjusting my sleeping bag a few times, and the next thing I knew, I was waking up. Not all the way, just barely. The kind of waking that happens when your brain senses something's off, but you don't know what yet. I didn't move, didn't open my eyes. It was completely quiet. My heart wasn't racing yet, but something had pulled me out of sleep. Then I heard it, breathing, not mine, not an animal, just breathing, slow, steady, human-like. It was close, too close, just behind my head, maybe 2 feet away on the other side of the tent wall. I felt it before I fully heard it, the way you sense a presence right behind you when you're not expecting it. The breaths were long and deliberate. Inhale, exhale, again. It wasn't sniffing like a bear or raccoon. It wasn't heavy or labored, just slow and calm, like someone standing completely still. I kept my eyes open, staring into the dark. My sleeping bag felt like a trap. My hands were pinned at my sides. I didn't move. I couldn't even bring myself to shift. Every hair on my arms stood up. I don't know how long I laid there. Could have been minutes. Could have been longer. The breathing didn't stop. It didn't change rhythm. It stayed in the same place, right behind my head, outside the thin layer of nylon. No movement, no footsteps, nothing but breath. Eventually, I worked up the nerve to slide one hand slowly over to my flashlight. It was next to my sleeping pad, close enough to reach without making a sound. My fingers wrapped around it and I held it tight. I didn't turn it on yet. I just listened a little longer. Still there. I opened my mouth, trying to say something, but my throat felt dry and stiff. My voice cracked when I finally managed to speak. Hello. The second the word left my mouth, the breathing stopped. Gone. Cut off mid-exhale, like it had never been there. Now I was fully awake. My heart was hammering. I unzipped the sleeping bag quickly and sat up, yanked the flashlight up and clicked it on. The beam lit the inside of the tent first, empty of course, and then I turned toward the back wall and stared through the mesh. Nothing, just trees and darkness. No shapes, no sound. I waited. Then I unzipped the door and leaned out, light in one hand, the other ready to grab the bear spray from the side pocket of my pack. I scanned the clearing, the trees, the shore of the lake. Nothing. I stood up, light sweeping over the dirt, the moss, the brush. No footprints, no disturbed branches, no gear, no dropped items, no movement at all. The air was totally still, dead quiet, not even wind through the trees anymore. I walked in a slow circle around my tent, checked the trail, the tree line, everything I could see within 50 feet. Still nothing. I stood there for a while, just listening, waiting for something else to happen. But nothing ever did. Eventually, I sat on the rock by the lake with the flashlight on and just watched the woods. I didn't sleep again that night. When the first light started creeping in through the trees, I was already rolling up my sleeping bag. I didn't make breakfast. I didn't take time to filter water or eat. I took the tent down fast, stuffed everything into my pack, grabbed the dry bag from the tree, and headed out. The hike back felt longer than it had the day before. The trail seemed darker somehow, like the trees had grown closer together overnight. I kept checking over my shoulder. Every small sound, a twig snapping, a bird flapping, made me stop and scan the woods. But I never saw anyone. No one passed me. No boot prints. No wrappers. No trash. Nothing. When I finally saw my car, I felt a wave of relief so strong I almost laughed. I threw my gear into the back and didn't stop until I hit paved roads and had a couple bars of cell service. Then I pulled over and just sat there for a long time with the engine running. I still don't know what I heard that night. Maybe someone else had hiked out there. Maybe they found my tent and decided to mess with me. But I never heard footsteps. No zipper sounds. No voices. Just breathing. And the fact that there were no prints. No sign anyone had even walked near my tent. That still gets to me. I haven't camped alone since. A few years ago, I went camping with my girlfriend in Utah, deep in canyon country. We'd both been working stressful jobs, and this was our first real break in months. The plan was simple: hike a few miles in, set up near a hidden canyon spot we'd heard about through a friend, stay 2 nights, and just enjoy being away from everything. No service, no emails, no noise, just red rock, sky, and silence. We got to the trailhead around mid-morning. There was only one other vehicle there, a beat-up, older model Ford pickup with Utah plates. It looked like it hadn't moved in days. All the windows were fogged up, like someone had been breathing in there overnight. The inside of the windshield had smudges where it looked like someone had wiped it with a hand. I remember noticing trash in the bed of the truck. Crushed soda cans, a torn-up tarp, what looked like an old camp stove. There was something uncomfortable about the way the whole thing sat there, like it didn't belong, or maybe like it had just been left to rot. As we parked and started unloading our packs, the truck's driver door creaked open. A guy stepped out, wiry build, scruffy beard, maybe in his 40s. His clothes looked like they hadn't been washed in a while. Faded jeans, long-sleeve shirt with the sleeves rolled to the elbow, and boots caked in dry mud. He didn't say anything, just stood there beside his truck, staring straight at us while we double-checked our gear. I gave him a polite wave. He didn't wave back. No nod, no acknowledgement, just blank staring. My girlfriend glanced at me but didn't say anything. We both felt it, that low, quiet tension. Something about him was off, but we didn't want to overthink it. We headed out on the trail not long after. It was a dry, hot day, cloudless blue sky, the sun already cooking the ground by late morning. The trail started out wide and easy but narrowed quickly, winding between red rock formations and dropping into sandy washes. After about 2 miles, we noticed something that stuck with me: boot prints, fresh ones, headed in the same direction we were going. The same tread repeating again and again in the soft dust. But we hadn't passed anyone. No one had come from the trailhead behind us, just that man in the truck. And we hadn't seen him set out, hadn't seen him with a pack. Still, the prints were there, big enough to be his. We didn't talk about it at first, just looked at each other, then kept moving. I could feel the air getting heavier after that. Every snap of a twig made me turn my head. I kept glancing over my shoulder, but nothing, no one, just the desert and the wind and the sound of our boots scraping against rock and dirt. By early afternoon, we found the spot we'd been looking for. A small clearing tucked between canyon walls, not visible from the main trail. There was a shallow overhang for shade, a few flat areas for the tent, and plenty of dry wood for a fire. We set up camp. Everything went fine. We cooked some dinner on the camp stove: beans, rice, tortillas. Sat by the fire after dark and listened to the crackling and the far-off howl of wind slipping between the rocks. My girlfriend had finally started to relax. She leaned against me, quiet, warm. I remember thinking that this was why we came, to be away from it all, to just be still for a while. It was around midnight when she shook me awake. I'd fallen asleep hard, Miles of hiking, heavy pack, the dry heat. It hit me all at once. But her hand was on my arm, and when I opened my eyes, I could tell she was tense. Not panicking, not loud, just whispering low and sharp. "Did you hear that?" I didn't at first, but then I did. Crack. A twig snapped. Then another. Not loud but close. Maybe 30 feet from the tent. Then silence. Then a footstep. Slow. Crunch. Crunch. Someone was moving around us, circling. Not charging, not crashing through the brush. Just deliberately, slowly, step by step. Like they were trying to be quiet but weren't trying hard enough. I sat up fast, trying not to make a sound as I pulled on my boots. My heart was thudding in my ears. I didn't have a weapon. No knife except a small folding one in my pack. No gun. Nothing. I grabbed my flashlight and clicked it on, aiming it toward the sound. Nothing. Just trees and dark and the flicker of the dying campfire. I shouted out, my voice shaking a little. "We're armed." I wasn't, but it felt like the right thing to say. Then nothing. No retreating footsteps. No rustling. Just silence. Thick, total silence. That kind that sinks into your bones. We sat there, frozen, for what felt like 20 minutes. I kept the light moving. Nothing moved back. Eventually, we crawled out and added more wood to the fire. We stayed up the rest of the night, huddled near the flames, barely speaking. Every few minutes, I would sweep the beam of the flashlight across the surrounding trees and brush. I didn't see anything, not once, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. When the sky finally started to brighten, a dull purple spreading over the canyon rim, we packed fast. We didn't eat. We barely spoke. My girlfriend kept glancing over her shoulder, and I kept my hand near the pocket where my knife was buried. The air felt different. Still, no birdsong, no morning insects, just wind and silence. About 50 yards from our tent, just behind a line of low brush, I found something that made my stomach drop. A crushed cigarette butt, still fresh, the filter torn slightly, the tobacco blackened at the end. And next to it, tucked neatly under the branches, was a coil of rope, clean and used, laid out in a perfect circle like it had been placed carefully. I didn't say anything, just stared at it. My girlfriend saw it too. Her face went pale. We didn't touch it, just turned and kept walking. We made it back to the trailhead by mid-morning. The truck was gone. No sign it had ever been there, just an empty patch of dirt where it had been parked. The entire hike back, I kept thinking about that rope, about the way the cigarette butt was left so close to our tent, but not right next to it, like whoever was out there wanted to be close but not be seen. And the footsteps, how they stopped after I yelled. Not ran, just stopped. We never went back to that area. I looked up reports afterward. Missing hikers, suspicious activity, but didn't find anything that matched. We didn't tell many people about it either. What would we even say? Nothing happened, technically, but something did. Something we'll never be able to explain fully. Sometimes, I still wake up at night, thinking about the way those footsteps sounded. Slow, measured, getting closer, then stopping. And I wonder what would have happened if we hadn't yelled, if we hadn't lit that fire, if we'd stayed asleep. I've been needing a reset. Just one night in the woods. Nothing major. No multi-day hike, no mountaintop summit. Just a quiet evening alone, off a less traveled trail in Colorado. I picked a spot I'd camped near once before. Nothing special, but far enough from the city and the crowds. I parked at the small trailhead around noon, and there were no other vehicles. That was part of the appeal. Quiet, empty, undisturbed. I hiked in maybe 2.5 miles. Enough to feel separated, but not so far I couldn't bail if the weather turned. The day was dry, cool, with some wind rustling through the pine trees now and then. The spot I chose wasn't exactly scenic, but it was tucked between some low, rocky hills and shielded on most sides by trees. A good natural barrier from the wind. I laid out my tent on a patch of flat dirt and pine needles, gathered enough deadfall to make a small fire, and sat for a long while just listening. Birds mostly, wind, the occasional squirrel crashing dramatically through branches. I cooked a simple dinner, boiled rice and some rehydrated beans. Not fancy, but warm. I watched the sun drop below the ridge around 7:30, and the air got cold fast. I put on my heavier jacket and sat by the fire as the woods around me fell into darkness. I had a decent headlamp and a backup flashlight, but I didn't like using them much. I preferred the firelight, that soft orange glow that makes the edges of the forest flicker. I don't know what time it was when I noticed the other fire. Maybe 8:30 or 9. I stood up to stretch and walked a short ways from my fire to pee, and when I turned around, I caught a faint orange light between the trees, just over a small rise to the east. At first, I thought maybe it was the moon low on the horizon, but it was flickering. Definitely a fire. Small, steady. Someone else was out there. That fire hadn't been there earlier. I was sure of it. From where I stood, I could see a decent stretch of the landscape, and I would have noticed another glow, especially in this kind of dark. My first thought was just another camper. Maybe someone came in late, but I hadn't seen another soul all day. No other hikers, no dogs, no footprints at the trailhead, no cars. Nothing. Still, the woods are big. It wasn't impossible someone bushwhacked in from another direction. I stared at that glow for a while, just trying to get a read on it. It didn't flicker high like a big bonfire, more like a small, controlled flame, almost too steady. Then I saw movement, a figure, dark against the trees, walking slowly away from the fire, toward me. I froze, just stood there, backlit by my own fire, eyes locked on that shape. I couldn't make out much, just a vague outline, broad shoulders, slow steps, arms hanging at their sides. They were far off, maybe half a mile, maybe more, but walking deliberately in my direction. I turned off my headlamp and crouched. My fire still burned behind me, but I let my eyes adjust. I grabbed my flashlight and kept it in my hand without turning it on. The person moved behind a cluster of trees and stopped. I waited. A minute passed. 2. Then I saw them again, moving, but this time they took a different route, lower, circling behind some brush. It wasn't a straight path. It was like they were avoiding open space, trying not to be seen. That set something off in my chest. That tight, slow burn fear. Not panic, not yet, but the start of something that wouldn't go away. I stood up and stoked my fire, poking at the wood until the flames got higher and brighter. Then I turned my flashlight on and started scanning the woods. Back and forth, steady beam. The figure didn't reappear. The other fire still burned faintly in the distance, but now I couldn't tell if the person had walked back to it or if someone else was still sitting there. I kept scanning. I thought about calling out, but something stopped me. I didn't want to let them know exactly where I was, even though my fire did that for me anyway. Minutes passed, maybe 20, maybe longer. I stayed standing, flashlight in one hand, a thick stick in the other. I listened harder than I ever had before. Not for animals, for footsteps, crunches, snaps, breathing. I didn't hear anything. Eventually the fire out there started dying. The glow dimmed little by little until it was gone. Just blackness in the direction it had been. No embers, no lanterns, nothing. I waited. I didn't move. I didn't go in my tent. I didn't sit. I just stood by my fire, heart pounding, eyes darting at every small noise. The wind blew sometimes and made the branches creak in a way that sounded almost like footsteps. Every time, I looked up expecting to see someone standing there. I remember checking my watch at one point. It was 1:47 a.m. That was the last time I looked. After that, the night stopped feeling like time was moving at all. It just dragged. I never saw the figure again. No more fires, no more movement, but I didn't sleep. Not for a second. My fire burned low around 3 or so. I threw more on it when I needed to, just to keep the space lit. I didn't care about conserving wood. I just needed it to stay bright. The worst part was imagining what they were doing. Were they watching me from the trees? Waiting for me to sleep? Was it just some weirdo wandering through the woods and stumbled on my camp? Was it a hunter? A drifter? Someone hiding something? It doesn't take much to lose your grip out there, in that silence, with nothing but your own heartbeat and the crackle of flames. Every sound becomes something to decode. Every shadow turns suspect. Finally, around 5 in the morning, the sky started to shift. Barely. A little gray bleeding into the black above the trees. That was enough. I packed up as fast as I could. Tent down, sleeping bag stuffed, stove cold, everything shoved into my pack haphazardly. I didn't eat. I didn't drink. I just got out. I hiked fast, headlamp on, eyes over my shoulder every few seconds. The trail felt different in the early morning light, like the woods were watching me go. I reached the trailhead before full daylight, lungs burning, legs aching, but I didn't stop. Just threw my pack into the car, slammed the door, and locked it. There were still no other cars in the lot. I sat in the driver's seat for a while, just breathing, hands trembling slightly on the steering wheel. Eventually, I started the engine and pulled out. I didn't look back. I don't know what I saw that night. I don't know who that person was or why they were there, why they moved the way they did, or why the fire disappeared when it did. I don't know if it was innocent, if it was just bad timing, or something worse. But I do know this, something about it felt off. Too quiet, too careful, too deliberate. I haven't been back to that area since, and I've never camped solo again.